All right, today you are going to build a city in Photoshop. Your goal is to utilize layers to show depth in an image. We're going to use the shape tool, the marquee tool, and we're also going to add some text to your image. These are examples of students' work from the past. Okay, we are going to create a new image. I'm going to title this image City. It is going to be 11 inches by 8.5 inches. And I'm going to click Create. So that's going to give me my new canvas. I'm going to leave my background layer alone and go ahead and create a new layer. And what I'm going to do is repeat what we did yesterday. We used the rectangular marquee tool, where we could create a new selection, add to and remove from the selection. So I'm going to drag out a new selection. And then I'm going to go up and I'm going to change to, not to add to, but I want to remove from, because I want to cut windows out of the building. So now I'm going to come down to my building and I'm going to go ahead and start cutting out windows. Imagine this is like construction paper and you are removing windows from the selection. Remember, right now, while the marching ants are going around, there's actually nothing on my page because I have not filled my selection yet. So this is kind of like tracing an outline. And I'm just going to create a shape. And actually, while I'm removing these shapes from my building, or these windows from my building, if I put something behind the building in my picture in a different layer, I would actually be able to see through my building into the background. So that's what removing that does. I'm going to go over and grab my paint bucket, and then I'm going to grab a color out of swatches for my building, and I'm going to go ahead and set those swatches to, I'm just going to choose a color blue, then I'm going to come over and spill that on my building. In order to turn off the marching ants, I need to press Command D. And then I'm going to go over, double click on that layer 1, and I'm going to rename my building Blue Building. Okay, now once I have my blue building, I'm going to select a new layer, and this is where our new skills come in. I'm going to go up to the top here when my shape is selected, my rectangle, and I need to make sure that this option up top is not set to shape, but set to pixels. That way, when I drag out a shape for my next building, it comes up as a shape and not as a path. So make sure that top selection up there says pixels and not shape or path. And what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to create a new color for this building. So I'm going to go ahead and get my paint bucket and turn it to blue. And then what I'm going to do is go ahead and create a new layer here shortly. And what my new layer is going to be is for windows. So this time I'm layering shapes on top of shapes. So I'm going to go ahead and get a white color, and I'm going to pull out shapes. So I'm pulling out 2 squares on top of my building, and these are going to represent my windows. Then I'm going to go ahead and pull out another rectangle, which is going to act as my door. And there I have it. I have a separate layer from my building, which are now windows. So I have 2 layers for my purple building, my window layer and the door. And then I also have my building layer, which is the purple building. What I'm going to do is I'm going to actually merge these 2 layers together. So I control click, which acts as a right click, and then I'm going to select merge layers. So I merge those 2 layers and I rename that one layer now with the building and the windows, purple building. So now I have a blue building and a purple building. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to build a sign on top of this building. So I'm going to stick with my rectangular tool, and I'm going to go ahead, and my sign is going to be composed of 3 different rectangles. So I'm making the legs for my sign, and then I'm going to click and I'm going to drag out the big portion of my sign. Command Z, if you mess up here, you can just step backwards a step. If you do Alt or Option Command Z, you can step back multiple times. So there I have my sign, and I'm going to go ahead and leave that there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a new layer, and this is going to be a text layer. So I'm going to click directly on my sign. I'm not going to drag out a text box. I'm just going to click. And I'm going to go ahead and type the word store. Well, the reason why you can't see the word store there is because my text is the same color as the background. So up at the top, I select color for the text where the text properties are, and I changed it to black, and then I'm going to go ahead and select a different font. So this time I'm going to select something a little bit more fun and large for my sign. Then I'm going to adjust the size of my font. I like holding my finger on the text size and just sliding to the right so I can make it bigger instead of just putting in the font size there with numbers. And now I have a sign layer and then my text layer. And my sign seems very large for that text, so I'm going to Command T to transform. If I pull from that top handle, it is going to resize my sign, and that looks much better. So now what I'm going to do is I still have those two different layers, the sign layer and the store layer. If I press Shift, I can select both the sign and the store layer at once. And again, I'm going to Control click on those layers and merge layers. Okay, you can also go to Layer up at the top and then go to Merge Layers. I don't have to Control click on my Layers panel to merge. Layer up at the very top of the options and then Merge Layers also works. Now I'm going to rename this the purple building. So now I have a second building and I can turn that whole building on and off at once. Okay, last skill. We're going to still stick with the shape tool, and I'm going to select a color for my building before I drag it out. That way when I drag out the rectangle for my building, it will automatically pop up in the color that I want it to. I have the basic shape for my building. I'm going to add a new layer, and I'm going to add windows to that. So I'm going to go back to my white, and I'm going to hold Shift as I drag out, and that will give me a perfect rectangle. So this time I'm just going to make one window. What I'm going to do this time is drag that layer, and I am going to, I don't see duplicate layers right here, but what I am going to do is take this layer and drag it down to that new layer button, which will in turn duplicate my layer. Now what I'm doing is going to select the Move tool up at the top, hold Shift and drag to the right, and that will duplicate my window, and holding Shift will keep it in line with the other window. I'm going to do that one more time to give me a third window. Hold Shift on that second window, drag over to the right. That gave me a third window. So now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to merge, use that merge layers. So hold Shift, select all three window layers, and go down to merge layers. So now I have one layer of three windows. Okay, and I'm just going to rename that window so I don't get confused with the building layer and the windows layer. I'm going to take that windows layer, drag it down, and I'm going to make a copy now of three windows. Hold Shift and drag down to keep it in line. And now I have three windows. So now what I can do is I can merge those two layers, and then I'll create a layer of 6 windows. So then when I take those 6 windows and I drag that down to the new layer copy, or it will copy that layer, and I can copy 6 more windows down on my building. So take it, pull it down, hold Shift, drag down, and now I have 12 windows. So that's fun. Now what I'm going to do is just pull out one last shape, and I pull out my door. So then I have all my windows and my door on my building. So now what I need to do, I'm going to rename that door, and then I'm going to go ahead and hold Shift. I'm going to take all these layers, so I have the door, the windows, 2 sets of windows, and my buildings. That's a lot of different layers. I'm going to go to that top layer, hold Shift and select the bottom layer, Control click, go down, and merge the layers. So now I have all 3 of my buildings and different skills. I'm going to rename that green building. So that's done. And now the beauty of Photoshop is I can move things. So my green layer is on the top, green building layer is on the top. So that means that green building is going to go in front of everything. But if I move it underneath the purple building layer, it goes behind the purple building. So now I get to show depth. So once I build all of my buildings, I can start stacking them and creating depth within my city. So now on our background layer, I'm going to go to my background layer and I'm going to drag out a big rectangle just to represent the sky so I can really start creating and adding detail to my city. Notice how you can see the sky through that first building we did because we cut the windows out. And in the green building, it's just behind it. I'm going to build another layer. Notice how I pulled that just above my background layer, but underneath the buildings, and that's going to be a road. So now I can just, really my options are endless. I can start building different layers, making sure they're named properly, and we're building a city. Have fun!